Good evening, everyone. Buenas noches. My name is Judy Blake, and I am the Leadership and Advocacy Coordinator for Family to Family Network. We are very, very happy to have a wonderful group tonight from Houston, Texas, and we are having part 2 of our special education training classes. So I want to introduce my amazing, fabulous, brilliant colleague, Leslie Lawson. She's like, me? Really? Yes, you, who I could not manage without. I just want to take that information and put it into my brain. I also want to welcome my other amazing, brilliant colleague, Christina Zavala.
Hello, hola.
And thank God she is bilingual. Yay. So we love Christina and we love Leslie. So I just wanted to let everyone know that we will be letting some people in. If for some reason you get bumped off and you need to get back on, no problem, you'll always be let back in. Now, about half of you from the other night completed the survey. Yay, thank you, because I sent you the link. But the other half didn't. So please, please, please complete the survey. The one that I posted in the chat box is for tonight's survey. And then the one for check your emails, the one for November 8th is in your email. Please, please, please complete the survey because it's really, really important to us. So I'm really glad for the 2 people that just joined us. So I'm going to go ahead and have Leslie share her screen. Thank you, Leslie. And hola, Celia, thank you for joining us.
Hola.
Could you mute yourself, please? Not you, Ryan. You're good. Here, I'll do it. There we go. So one of you had written the other night in the survey that you had a question. And I apologize, but I didn't quite understand what it was that you, oh, yikes, I can't, okay, I can't reduce my screen. So to the person who had a question from the other night, it doesn't allow me to see the question because I'm recording, but please make sure that we get that question answered because you wrote it in the survey. So what we talked about the other night was your introduction to the special education process. And tonight, we're going to talk about top tips for successful ARD and IEP meetings. Next slide, please. So welcome back. Please, please remember, this is a really, really safe place, a very safe place. No question is silly. No question is crazy. We want you to know that you can ask any question. We know that we're giving you a lot of information and it is very, very overwhelming. We don't expect you to remember everything. We know that there is a lot and all questions are welcome. If you could wait until the presentation is finished, that would help a lot because we have a lot of information to get through. So if you feel uncomfortable asking a question, no worries, we understand. You can private message myself, Leslie Lawson, and we will ask the question for you. If you speak Spanish, please message Christina Zavala, and she will then ask your question anonymously. So we just want to make sure that everyone's muted so we can hear what we're saying. And our goal, oh, I forgot again to change that. Our goal is to finish by about 7 o'clock because we know that you have a lot of obligations this evening. You will be sent the slides as promised when the presentation is finished. So tip number one, we talked about this the other day, and it really is important to repeat it. You know your child better than anyone else, and you have so many rights as a parent in the special education process. You must learn your rights if you want your child to receive, by law, a free and appropriate education. It is called FAPE, F-A-P-E. And FAPE requires schools to provide special education to meet the unique needs of your child. So that doesn't mean that creating one plan for 10 kids in the class. It needs to be unique to your child, and they're following the law. So tip number two, we talked about the IDEA manual. IDEA stands for Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Keep in mind, this is federal law, not Texas, federal law. And it ensures that public schools serve the educational needs of students with disabilities. You need to read it, learn it, use it, and take it with you to your meeting with the school, because then the school will accept you as an equal member of the IEP, the ARD team, if they know that you know your rights. So just to review a little bit, when they have those meetings, it's called ARD meetings, which stands for Admission Review Dismissal. And the IEP is the Individualized Education Plan. Some people call it program. But you can't speak up for your child, or it would be really hard to speak up for your child if you didn't know what your rights were. So this IDEA manual can be downloaded, and it's in English and Spanish. So Spanish speaking families, it's in your native language, which is really important. And we've given you the link to do that.
Probably need to share the Spanish version link too, Judy.
I think that when you go on it, it'll say right there, do you want English or Spanish?
Okay.
I think so. And you can always contact us at Family to Family Network if it's not there. So tip number three, the IEP, that Individualized Education Plan. Keep in mind that is everything about your child, and it's the centerpiece of that legislation that was passed and part of the IDEA. It's to make sure that children with disabilities have a free, appropriate public education that emphasizes special education and related services. And those services are to meet the unique needs of your child. Because what this is planning your child for is further education. It could be college, it could be vocational training, it could be junior college. Also employment and independent living. Now it's possible that maybe, your child isn't going to go to college. My son didn't, but he worked. But you want to make sure that that IEP, that Individualized Education Plan for your child, is working towards achieving the goals that you have for your child and that your child has for themselves. And I'm not talking about at 3 and 4 years old, your child isn't going to know, but once they start getting into upper elementary, middle school, high school, they have dreams, they have goals. And just because your child has disabilities doesn't mean those dreams and goals can't be achieved. So think of that IEP as a contract. It is a contract between you and the school. It's your role as a parent to participate in the development of that individual education plan or program. So always understand what you're agreeing to. If you don't agree, We talked about it the other day and we'll be talking about it more, what you can do if you don't agree with the decision. Tip number 4, cuatro. There's that 4 years of Spanish I learned in high school paying off. What should you do before your ARD or IEP meeting? So gather information. And the information can mean notes from the doctor, speech therapist. You want draft copies of evaluations that your child has had. You want to know what their present levels of academic achievement and functional performance are. It's a very difficult abbreviation, but we call it PLAF. And I know that's not easy, but we want to know, and you want to know, before you go into that meeting, where is your child at? Are they where you thought they would be? And if not, this is the time to talk about it. What are going to be the proposed goals, objectives? And are there going to be any supplemental materials? Does your child have a behavior plan in place? If they're on the autism spectrum, are there any autism strategies that are being used? Is there any vision, hearing issues? Maybe there's a technology adaptation that might need to be made. So you want to read through these documents ahead of time and know what people are going to talk about. So when we mean ahead of time, we don't mean 20 minutes before your ARD meeting. It should be at least a few days so that you have time to look at it, make notes, ask questions, maybe write them on the side or on a separate sheet of paper. But please know that when you see those documents, it should not be the first time you're seeing them. You have the right to ask them beforehand so that you can then review them and know what questions to ask. Tip number 5, Cinco, as in Cinco de Mayo. There we go. Trying to add a little humor to this, everyone. An evaluation. Know that all services that a child needs are based on the initial evaluation, and then subsequently on data collection or further assessments. So what we're saying there is that there is a timeline, and we talked about that before in the other session on Monday, that there's a certain number of days that the school has to give that initial evaluation. But if you want additional evaluations, there are no required deadlines for those or a reevaluation. So if you want your child to get another evaluation, find out when it's going to be completed and get that documented in the IEP. I do want to say, and Leslie, feel free to disagree with me on this. I mean, we don't want to over-test our kids. We don't want to over-evaluate them. But it's not unreasonable for your child to be reassessed maybe every year, but at a minimum, they should be assessed every 3 years by law. And when we talked the other day about a read is a review of existing evaluations and data. That's just a review. That's looking over all of the documents on your child. That's not an actual evaluation. And just a reminder, we talked about an IEP, which is that independent evaluation.
IEE.
An IEE, and we talked about that as well. Next slide, tip number 6. So it's the day of the meeting. If you can, please try to get someone to go with you. It might be a neighbor, a family member. We know that you hate asking for help for people, but I got to tell you, and I've been through tons of ARD meetings, and so has Leslie, it can be really overwhelming. You know, you're sitting there and there's all of these people around you that you may not know. or maybe you've met once or twice before. So if you have someone that can come and they know your child even better, but at least if there's someone that can be there for moral support for you, and they can also be that second set of ears and eyes, I think that's really important. So try to do that if you can. Oh, go Edgar. Yes, yes, yes.
And Judy, I was going to say too, you might at some point need to bring an advocate. There are advocates that you can pay, and then there are advocates that don't charge, like with Disability Rights Texas or the ARC of Greater Houston. So you don't want to be dependent on them because they don't know your child. But if you get to a point where you're in a disagreement, you may want to ask for a little help from an advocate.
Yes. And the ARC of Greater Houston has an advocate, as does Partners Resource Network. Keep in mind though, and Leslie brought up a great point, that doesn't mean you're passing the buck. Sorry, translators or interpreters, if there is no Spanish translation for that. But it's still your parents, the parents' responsibility, because you're the one signing that agreement, not the advocate.
And you want to make sure you're on the same page with the advocate.
Absolutely. So you want to meet with them ahead of time. Let them know your concerns. Make sure that your questions get addressed. And that the person you bring with you, maybe they take the notes. We're going to talk about the ARD agenda and supporting you during the meeting, and we'll get to that part. Take your child to the meeting. Let them know who your child is. They don't have to stay for the whole time, but at least they can introduce themselves. It's really important that your child be more than a piece of paper. Your child needs to have a face. They need to have their smile, because this is really important. And it's more than just documents. Let them meet your child. Let them know what they like and don't like. And then let them return to class. This can help prepare your child for the day when they are required to attend the meetings. And that's beginning in high school. And your child will be an active participant come high school. Now, I know some parents, their kids have started in middle school, coming to the ARD meetings and staying the entire time. Talk about it with your child when they get older. Ask them. I realize that your kids are young right now, the people on this call, but the future will be here before you know it. My sons have turned 30 and 26. I don't know where the time went. So tip number 7, during the meeting, ask questions. I know that on this meeting, you have the luxury of not having to speak up. You can send it privately to Christina or Leslie or me. But in an ARD meeting, you've got to ask questions. You are as important as anyone else. And you need to know what people are talking about. If they're using all of these abbreviations that don't make sense to you, wait a minute, time out. Please remind me what the abbreviations are. Because if you don't understand something, you need to ask what they mean. And then if they're making a decision about something, or they want to make a decision, ask for the data. Ask what is the data to support that decision being made? And how is that data going to be collected, or has it been collected? Ask for support if you need it. Ask if others need support. If you ask a yes or no question, you're going to get a yes or no answer. So it's really good to ask open-ended questions like, okay, and I'm just picking out a name, Billy. So if we want Billy to, get a certain number of spelling words, or something like that, what will that take? Does Billy need less spelling words than the other kids? Does he need them ahead of time? What's going to take to make sure that your child is included in regular education classes? Some people call them general education classes. Some of you on this call may want your child only in special education. That's okay if that's what you want, but it's really important that they learn from their peers. Like they learn from kids who do not have disabilities. So what is it going to take for the child to receive a service in regular or general education class? These kinds of questions are really great because they allow the members of the committee to really come up with solutions and brainstorm. They have to just think and make it happen. And during the school year, you want to keep in contact with the teachers. The time to find out information is not only at the ARD meeting. And you want to work in a communication system that works best for you. I know that a lot of you are younger on this call. I'm probably old enough to be your mother, and a lot of you are used to texting. Well, texting is okay, but you know, you lose your phone, something happens, it's not backed up. I'm an email person. So work out a system with the teacher. If they're getting speech therapy, work out a system with the speech therapist. You know, it's really hard for teachers. They're juggling a lot. They're doing the best they can, but maybe get weekly updates. What you don't want to find out is at the end of that, what is it, 6-week or 9-week grading period, that your child is missing assignments or not able to keep up, or there's behavior issues. They shouldn't have to wait 9 weeks to tell you that. You need to find out right away, or as soon as right away as possible, so that you can work together before the ARD meeting to discuss your concerns and develop goals. Set up a communication system that works for you and make sure that everything is documented and that you keep records of that. Again, teachers are juggling, so it's possible they may not be able to get back to you right away, but hopefully within the next 24, 48 hours, they can. Document, document, document. Remember, if it's verbal, if it's spoken, it may not happen. You know, if you pick up your child and they verbally tell you something, that doesn't count. It has to be in writing, and it needs to be in the ARD document. Make sure you know those procedural safeguards. We talked about those in the first session, and we're going to be going over it again. You want to make sure that you know about page 2, that's prior written notice, so that if the school refuses or proposes to do something for your child, you need to know about it, and it needs to be in writing. Texas Project First is an amazing website, and it's written in English and Spanish, and that is the link. And you can put in the search button, or I think the language, and it will say English or Spanish, and it has everything that you need to know. So you can even put in the search engine, the search field, I'm sorry, procedural safeguards, and it will bring them up. So it's really important to make sure that you are educated. I know that it is really overwhelming when you have a child with a disability. I completely understand. It's not something you expect, but you know what? Your child is a child first. They have hopes, they have dreams, they have wants, they have likes, and they can do so much in life. The disability does not define them. It's just a part of who they are. It's like me having blue eyes and me being me. Just know that your child is a child first, And the disability just allows them to get certain services in place to make sure that they're getting the right support. But you need to be educated about their disability. If you don't know what autism is, Google it. We have listed great websites, Texas Project First, and you're going to be getting some of these in the third session that can explain to you about the disabilities. Attend trainings by parent organizations, the school district. Everyone on this call is part of an education service center. And you can actually Google Region 4 Education Service Center, and it will bring up all of their training classes. But understand what an intellectual disability is, dyslexia, autism. An important part of the ARD process is the ARD agenda, and it helps you keep yourself organized during the meeting. And you can print off this page and bring it to you, so you're going to know all of the different steps that are going to happen in the ARD meeting. Again, it's in English and Spanish, and I'm going to be sending you the slides after this meeting so you can be able to click on it and it will bring it right to you. So it's really important to use the tools that are provided to you so that you understand what's going to happen in the ARD meeting, at what step it's going to happen, what your rights are, and we talk about the dispute resolution handbook. There's a wonderful website called Parent Companion for parents who have children between the ages of birth and 6 years old. And then Texas Project First and the IDEA manual that we mentioned. So all of these can help you get prepared. Leslie, did you want to take over at this point?
I can.
One quick question before you do. So Gabriella, because I think you signed on a little bit later. Gabriella, can I have your last name, please, if you could unmute yourself? Is it Gabriella Kayard?
Yes, my last name is Callard, C-A-L-L-E-R-D.
Bueno, muchas gracias. And
De nada.
thank you. And then there was one other person that I wasn't sure. We have 2 iPhones. I got you, William. I got Karina, but there were 2 iPhones on. And one of them, I believe, was Ms. Briones, but I wasn't sure who the other one was.
I think it's me, Claudia Hernandez. Yeah.
Claudia, hola, Claudia. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, and buenas noches, Karina. So Leslie, why don't you go ahead and take over? Thank you so much.
Okay, I may sound a little funny because I have allergies, but I hope you
Welcome
will.
to Houston.
Yeah. So you do want to be organized. So make sure you keep copies of everything. You're entitled to a copy of everything and keep it organized. Some people use binders, some people use accordions, but you want to have that with you when you go to the meeting. That way you can have it at your fingertips during the meeting. And we will definitely talk more about that. Judy's good about that. If you disagree with the ARD committee, know that you can disagree and it's okay to disagree. We always encourage you to work with the IEP committee. But, you know, if something's not right, if you don't understand something or you're not sure about something, you do have to sign your name and check a box that says agree or disagree. And if you do disagree, you have to take the next step. And we're going to talk about that too. If you don't agree with the evaluation, of course, you can request an independent evaluation. We talked a little bit Monday night. It doesn't have to be the whole evaluation if you only disagree with maybe the speech evaluation, or if you don't agree with the services they're going to give you based on that evaluation, you can get an IEE, an independent education evaluation, at the expense of the school. Of course, we don't think you should be disagreeing about every little thing. You know, it's a give and take process. So if you don't agree with something, make sure you write it down and give it to them to attach to the IEP documents. Or I like to talk to whoever, like the diagnostician who's taking the minutes of the meeting. And I always like to put a little note card out front by me that says, would you please put that in the minutes to help me remind myself to ask for that anytime you disagree or there's something important that you want noted in the notes and minutes of the ARD meeting. If you don't understand what's happening at the ARD meeting, you don't want to agree, that might be a good time to disagree. And if you do disagree, make sure there's a written statement reflected in the IEP of what your disagreement is about. Because if there's no statement of disagreement, they may assume that you are agreeing with them. So if you do disagree, they'll have, we used to call it a 10-day recess meeting or a reconvene meeting, but it'll be another meeting scheduled within 10 days or more, depending, the IEP committee can decide for it to be longer than 10 days. For instance, if you disagree because you want to get an IEE, you might want to wait until that's done to come back. But generally, you'll come back within 10 days and you'll both gather more information to support, you know, what you feel should happen or not happen. And hopefully you'll be working together. So when you come back to the reconvene meeting, you can come to some kind of agreement. So hopefully you will come to an agreement. If you don't, you definitely want to check disagree and use your procedural safeguards. You can also request a state facilitated IEP meeting. You must do that within 5 days of the disagreement. And that's where they send out an impartial person to try to bring both sides together and make sure everything in the IEP meeting has been explained well. And they just facilitate the meeting, and sometimes that can be helpful. If you still disagree at the 10-day meeting, the school will implement the IEP unless you take the next step, which would be either requesting mediation, filing a complaint, or filing for due process. One thing I wanted to mention too, if you're in disagreement about placement, like where your child's going to receive their special education placement. So what may happen is your child may be supported in general education, and maybe they start having some behaviors or difficulties, and they want to move your child to a more segregated placement. There's something called stay put. So if you disagree within 5 days, you have to file for due process and invoke what's called stay put. That way your child can stay in the general education placement until everything's been resolved. So that's just a little something that they might not tell you about. Go ahead.
And before Leslie goes on, so the goal is to really work with the school. And it's really important that, you know, everybody try to get along. This is your child. And it's difficult because I think our school systems are so overwhelmed. The pandemic has not helped. There's a shortage of teachers. And I feel for teachers and I feel for the school. But you still have the right to ask for what you believe is in the best interest of your child. You know, as Leslie says, you can't get everything. I mean, it's very difficult to get everything, I should say. But you can work towards something that is realistic so that your child has a meaningful time in the classroom with their peers. It is our hope that you don't have to go to due process. You just need to be aware of it, that it exists and it is your right. But the goal is really to work with the schools.
I think a lot of times parents will call me up and say, oh, the school did this or the school won't do that. And I'm like, wait a minute, you always have a choice. You have your rights. And so they can't do anything or not do anything unless you agreed or you disagreed and then didn't take the right steps.
That's
So
right.
just keep that in mind.
And communicate. You've got to communicate. You can't just wait until a year later and say, oh my gosh, this was a terrible year, and never have said anything.
Right.
There should be documentation supporting why your child is so unhappy. Don't wait until it gets to be too far.
Right. And I don't want you to think I'm telling you that everything bad's going to happen. I just want you to know worst case scenario and that you do have rights and you can do something about it. A lot of times, if you disagree and file either a complaint, mediation, or due process, it never goes any further because what TEA does, the Texas Education Agency, if you submit a complaint, mediation, or due process request, the first thing they do is they go to your school and they say, hey, please go have a resolution meeting with this family. And that's where things generally get worked out. But a lot of times I would say they think you're either not going to do that or don't know to do that. And it's there for a reason, so you can work things out. And the more you know, the more, I believe this truly, the more you know, the more you're going to get for your child. Because I learned to be a very strong advocate for my son. And in talking with other parents, it was very apparent to me that my child received a lot of services that other children didn't receive just because I knew how to advocate for that.
Oh, Leslie.
So also, I think it's important to have a vision for your child. It doesn't have to be anything elaborate. And I always like to share my vision for my son at the beginning of the meeting. My vision for him was to grow up, live in the community, be a contributing member of the community in any way that he could. My vision was not for him to grow up and live in a segregated environment like the state supported living center or something like that. So I always let them know that because that helped them to understand why it was so important for my child to be included in the regular education classes, where the expectations are high. He has good peer models, good behavior models, good social skills model, good speech models. He was invited to birthday parties and was included in the neighborhood, Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts, whatever. So have a vision for your child and share that with them. And I think it helps them understand why you're asking for certain things. The IEP is sort of like a map to get to the end destination. And I know a lot of you have young children, but you have to start now because every year that they're not included and exposed to the regular ed curriculum, they're falling further and further behind. Of course, I understand that some children do need some intensive supports that maybe can't be provided in regular education, and that's okay too. It doesn't have to be one way or the other. It can be a mixture. It was for my son. So go to your meeting with a clear idea of what you want to happen. I like to make a list of certain things and check them off as I go. That way I can, at the end of the meeting, I'm going to look at every page of the IEP document and the minutes and make sure they reflect or a good reflection of the meeting we just had. Because like Judy talked about earlier, if it's not written down somewhere, it's probably not going to happen. Oh yeah, your child's going to get speech. It's going to be great. What are the details? Are they going to get speech one-on-one? Is it going to be in a group setting? If it's in a group setting, is how many people are in the group? Because like if they're giving your child group speech for 20 minutes and there's 5 kids in there, your child's not really getting much speech. So you want to know those details. A lot of times I'll ask parents, well, what is there? One page in the IEP document is the schedule of services page, and it talks about all of those services. And a lot of times parents think their child is getting a service for a certain amount of time for a certain number of days of the week. And when we look at the schedule of services page, they had no idea what their child was really getting, or if their child was supposed to be getting in-class support, maybe they were only getting it for 15 minutes of the class and the parents thought it was for the whole class. So make sure you understand that whole document and ask questions about it. Oops. It's very sensitive. Yeah, and I want everybody to have hopes and dreams for your child, because I will tell you things change over time. You know, your child, well, let me just use an example with my child, Cameron. When he was real little, he has autism. He was very difficult. He was a runner. He had meltdowns and everything. But things changed over the years with a lot of help and intervention. He still has autism. He still has an intellectual disability, but he's very happy. He has good behaviors. He has enough speech to get his needs met. He goes to a great day program. He's not at home sitting on the couch. He does volunteer work. So definitely have big hopes and dreams. Of course, we want to always be realistic, just like with my typical son. You know, he wasn't good in math, so I didn't encourage him to be an engineer, but he was good at writing. So we kind of went the communication route. So definitely have realistic expectations, but do have high expectations. And take time at some point to write down your vision so you can share it. And like I said, it doesn't have to be anything elaborate. Another thing we wanted to talk about is Medicaid waiver programs. And some of you may have heard about these. There is Medicaid insurance, and then there's also these Medicaid waiver programs, which provide long-term care and supports for children and adults with disabilities. And we're going to make sure you have that information. Unfortunately, in Texas, the waiting list to get these services is very long. And so you want to make sure you get your child's name on the waiting list as soon as possible. There's several different waivers that we're going to share with you. And they offer things like respite care to the family, pay for therapies that maybe your insurance doesn't pay for, helps with daily living skills, might pay for summer camps, employment assistance later, just a whole array of services. And you don't want to wait till your child is an adult to get on the waiting list, because you're going to need these services sooner. And if your child comes up to the top of the list 15 years from now and you don't need the services, you just say no, thank you. So don't be hesitant. That's the best thing. The best thing I can tell you is tomorrow, if you have a chance, I believe we have the information in the slides. As soon as you can, get your child on the waiting list for these Medicaid waivers. They can be on as many waiting lists as you think that are applicable. They just can't be on the wave more than one waiver at a time. So, and for instance, my son's on the class waiver, and then his name came up on the HCS waiver. Then I had to compare the two waivers and decide which would be best for him long-term. And these waivers, it has nothing to do with the parent's income. It's only based on your child's income, and most children don't have income, and you don't ever want to put a lot of money or property or anything in your child's name that would keep them from getting these government services, because these waivers really help them live as independent as possible in your home or in an apartment or in the community. Some people get confused because it says they have to be Medicaid eligible, but once you get if you don't have Medicaid, once you get the waiver, that makes you eligible for Medicaid. So don't worry about that. Yeah, we said sign up today. You can compare the waivers. This is a great website. It's side by side, all the waivers and everything they offer.
And we're going to go into more of this on tomorrow night. You know, you have a plan in life. You plan your work day, you plan your day at home, you plan what you're doing for dinner, you plan for the holidays. It's really important to have a plan for your child. And signing up on these waiver programs is part of that plan. So you'll see the two numbers at the bottom of the
Let me
screen.
go back, Judy. There we go.
Oh, yeah. But then you'll see the two numbers. So all you have to do is call them and say, hi, I'm Judy Blake. I want to sign up my son for this waiver program. They'll probably ask the child's name, date of birth, and I think that's it. And then you'll call the 877 number. Yes, I want to register my child for the class waiver system. And then it is really important because when your child graduates from high school, anytime between the ages of 18 to 21, 22, what's going to happen after that? Well, this list that Leslie is showing tells you what those waiver programs help you with. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
There you go. Sorry, I was going backwards.
No worries.
Yeah, and your child might not qualify for all the waivers, but if you think they might, go ahead and sign up. The MDCP, the Medically Dependent Children Program, your child has to have a lot of medical needs, but my son's on class, like I said. A lot of people have HCS. Star Plus is a waiver for older. If you're on MDCP, you transition into the Star Plus waiver once you turn 21, and then there's a specific waiver for deaf-blind disabilities. And then Texas Home Living is another waiver that is a smaller waiver, but sometimes you come up sooner on that one. If you come up on any waiver, go ahead and accept it and keep your name on all the other waiting list and see what comes up next, because you don't want to turn anything down. Because I tell you, when we got the class waiver, it really changed our lives because we got so much help that we really needed, that I wish we could have got when he was younger. So now, if your child already has Medicaid, if your child is already Medicaid eligible, there is something called personal assistance services. You have to request that. And if you need any, you request that through your Medicaid case manager, and you may be able to get some help like respite care or some other things through your Medicaid plan. They don't tell parents about this all the time, but it's worth looking into. And hopefully, I don't know if everybody knows what respite care is, but it provides money for you to have somebody else come into your home, and it can be a family member. They have to meet certain criteria, and they care. It's like a babysitter, I guess. They come in and care for your child, so you can take a break, so you can have a night out or have a weekend out, because as caregivers, we all need to take a break and take good care of ourselves so we can be there long-term for our kids who really need us. So definitely take advantage of that. Also, you want to contact your local authority, which for Harris County is the Harris Center. And that's the same number that's on the HCS, the 713, or in Fort Bend, it's called Texana. Because even though you're on the waiting list for services, they may have other general revenue services that can help you now. So definitely check into that. Let's see. Okay, so now let me see what questions we have. somebody asked about signing up, I think, for the waivers. I'm thinking if your child doesn't have an intellectual disability or a medical disability, but has a mental health diagnosis. And yes, we didn't list that waiver, but there is a waiver called the Yes Waiver. And if you will email Judy or I, we'll get you the information for the Yes Waiver. And if that's not what you were asking, please speak up and let me know.
Yes, so my daughter is part of the Yes Waiver already, but she will age out of the Yes Waiver. So would she qualify for something like this? Like, for example, I'm talking about, because there's kids who don't have intellectual disabilities, don't have necessarily medical, but have, bipolar disorder or schizoaffective bipolar or schizophrenia, which still requires a significant amount of, and I know that some, these are normally things that are diagnosed later on in most people, but in some, you do see it in some children already, where there is that, that is part of, their person.
Right. So I would go ahead and do that. Like the class waiver, you don't have to have an intellectual disability. You can have another type of disability. I'm not so sure. I don't know if you know, Judy, if mental health like bipolar, but it's worth looking into. And the same with HCS, you can have a related disability and have a little bit higher IQ for HCS and still get services. So it's definitely worth signing up for. Another thing too is if your child is, when they turn 18, if they're not on a waiver, they're probably going to be eligible anyway for SSI.
Mhm.
And with SSI in Texas, they also get Medicaid, and there's something called Community First Choice hours. And so you may be able to get some hours that way with help. And I know they're looking into some mental health programs to develop. I'm not sure.
They are. Rocio, are you in Harris County?
I am not.
What
And
county are you in?
I'm in Hidalgo. So there's like almost nothing here.
Almost nothing, yeah.
Yeah. So we're lucky to have the Yes Waiver, and because of that. But
Is your
you know,
child
she's
on
going to-
Medicaid?
because in order to have the Yes Waiver, you do have to be on Medicaid.
Okay,
So we had to
so-
leave our private insurance to get the Yes
Oh.
Waiver, because even with the private insurance, we could not get the supports that we needed in
Mhm.
our area.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's tough.
Yeah.
Mental health here, it's, and I think the whole state as a whole, from what we were looking at, even in schools, it's not sustainable, because they require the schools to kind of also, like, doing the ED IEP was so difficult, because even the school struggled with that, because it's not very common. Most of the time it's based on a learning disability. But when you have a child who doesn't have a learning disability, but the environment, affects them because of their mental health, is kind of hard creating supports for that.
Right. Does your school district have adaptive education classes for children who are under the ED label?
No, they do not.
Yeah,
I
see,
mean-
our school districts here do. They have adaptive behavior programs that are very structured for students that have like bipolar or schizophrenia. And so I'm surprised they don't have. I'm going to look into that adaptive behavior class. What school district are you in?
So she's actually at a magnet school. She attends the top junior high in the state of Texas. It's called STPA. That's the top rank. That's the, it's like just recently got like a national award. This is for extremely smart kids. She's
That's great.
extremely intelligent. And that's great, but she
Have you reached
requires,
out to your local authority? I'm not sure who it would be.
I think the only thing we have here is NAMI, and it's a,
No,
It's
no, no.
more
This is a state agency, like in Houston,
Okay.
it's the Harris Center.
I don't know. Here we have tropical. They're the ones who do
Tropical,
the
right? That's who
yeah,
you
they
would have
would
reached
do
out
they
to.
just the only thing they've done is the yes waiver, but that's
Yeah.
pretty much it. They don't have really anything established with schools or anything. It's
Oh,
kind of hard.
And
sorry.
what STPA, is that affiliated with a public school district?
It's it's a charter school called South Texas School District. It's the South Texas School District. SDISD.
Okay,
Leslie, do you want to stop sharing your screen for me?
sure.
So we had another question from a mom. What if I'm moving to another state after the ARD meeting? Do I have to do, and then it cut off. So I wasn't sure what you were asking you have to do.
But I can answer this and it might help. So if you move to a different state, I can send you this very specific information, but you want to make sure you have a really good IEP, because when you move, they have to accept and provide comparable services until they have a chance to do their new evaluation. So they have to provide comparable services that are in your current IEP in the new district, in the new state, until they do their new evaluation. And then at that time, you want to be very careful that you don't let them reduce services and that you know your rights, because a lot of times we see that happen. They'll say, oh,
Yep.
we don't do that here. Well, you know, this is a federal law, so they
Right.
do have to do certain things. So make sure you have a really good IEP to go take with you.
Yeah, that's what you were asking in the chat box. I see the rest of it now. Do you have to repeat everything all over again? Well, document, document, document.
Sometimes
And,
they accept the sending, if the evaluation was pretty recent from the sending school district, sometimes they'll go ahead and accept everything. They may try to make some changes, but if it's been recently, they may not put you through a whole new evaluation, your child through a whole new evaluation. It just depends.
And then someone had a question from the other night, and I apologize, but I don't quite understand what you were asking. And it had to do with, oh gosh, I just had it. Yeah, I would want to know the process in debt. Is my child going to be singled out? If she tests in, will she need to test out of the program? And are the requirements to test out difficult? What if I want her to be removed from the program after a certain age, even if she doesn't test out? So I'm not quite sure what you meant about process in debt. I don't know what you mean. If you could unmute yourself or private message Leslie or myself or Christina. And there were a couple people who were on the other night who are not on today, but if this rings a bell to anyone, we'd be happy to answer the question. I just don't understand what it is you're asking.
Hey, Judy, I can't think of it off the tip of my head, but it's in the IDEA handbook for parents. But sometimes parents, you don't have to, just because your child is evaluated and qualifies for special education services, you don't have to accept those services. You want to think long and hard about not doing that, about not accepting the help. But anytime you can opt out. I mean, that's not something that happens frequently, but there's, can you think of the name of it, what they call that?
I can't.
I can't think of it off the top of my head. I can maybe pull it up here in a minute, but it is in the IDEA manual, and it's towards the front part of information about that, if that's what they were asking.
So any other questions that we can answer for you? We wanted to make this just top tips so that you can get through and have a successful meeting that's well planned and where you are educated. What we're going to do on Friday is talk about organizing all of your paperwork, We're going to review a couple of things because we know that this is a really complicated process. We completely understand. We are learning things every day. I mean, I promise you every day, I'm like, oh gosh, I didn't realize that. And I've been doing this a long time, and Leslie's been doing it a long time. But we want you to know, more importantly, that you're not alone. Yes, Leslie.
Another thing that I find helpful too, there's a website, and Judy, we can, maybe you can put it in there, or I can look it up real quick, or we can provide it. It's called Sped Text.
Yes.
And they have live people you can either chat with, talk on the phone with, or email with. And they are from one of the education service centers.
Mhm.
And I really, anytime I get questions all the time that I don't know the answer to. And so I'll go to Sped Text and I'll either chat or email with somebody. And I like to do the chat or email. Sometimes I talk to them, but then I ask them to send it in an email, because then when they answer my question, because a lot of times it's stuff that the school district said, like I had one the other day about homebound services. And if your child's in home, they told the parent that if your child was in homebound services, they couldn't have their speech therapy. And that didn't sound right to me. So I was able to talk to somebody at Sped Text, and they gave me the regulations out of the IDEA law. So I could then in turn give that to the parent, and they could show that to the school district, so they could and the school district, they're not bad people, but I will say sometimes everything doesn't filter down to each campus. And so there are going to be things they tell you that are wrong. So if something doesn't sound right, definitely Google it, call Family to Family or the ARC or Partners Resource Network or Disability Rights Texas if something doesn't sound right, and make sure, because a lot of times they just don't know. So if they say, oh, well, here we only do speech services in a group. Well, no, that's not
That's not true,
individualized. Yeah, so if they say something like that, anytime they say something that specific like that, if you ask them to put it in the minutes that they said that, can you please reflect in the minutes that school districts XYZ doesn't provide this service or this service in this way? Can you please reflect that in the minutes that Miss Principal said that? If they know they're telling you something wrong, they don't want to put it in writing. If they put it in there, it's because they really didn't know. And then you can go check it out, and then you can come back. Because if you don't have it documented, 2 weeks from now, they're going to say, oh, I'm sorry, Miss Garza, you misunderstood what I said. So document, document, document. I can't emphasize that enough.
Great point, Leslie. William asked a couple of good questions. With COVID, do you see ARD meetings moving online more and more in the future? William, I think our world is forever changed. I don't think it's ever going to go away. And if you're more comfortable having an ARD virtually because of COVID, absolutely. If that works for you, I'm sure you can do that. I think there is an important benefit to being in person. You can see the documents being passed back and forth. But it's possible that they may move online more and more. It's hard to say. As far as having meetings recorded, if you want to record the meeting, that certainly is your right, but let the school know ahead of time, because if you're recording it, they're going to want to record it too. And, I was fortunate. I did not have to record any of my meetings. How did the other participants feel about it? I don't know. Thoughts?
Well, I didn't record my meetings until there was a problem. And a lot of times people get their feathers ruffled. So some people think it's better to record from the very beginning. Just say, oh, I don't remember things. I don't retain things. So I'd really like to record it. But even if you have a recording, if you tried to use your recording in due process, you would have to pay to have that all transcribed. That's why I encourage you to say, would you please document that in the minutes for any important things? Because you want to have good documentation of everything that was said. If there's a paper trail of everything, you're less likely to end up in due process.
Definitely. Martha made a good point. She's a public school teacher and ARDs are in person now, at least on her campus. And yeah, I think they are much better in person. Rocio asked, what should be included as part of your child's vision statement? I would definitely, what are their likes, dislikes? What do they maybe have a dream of wanting to do? Do they want to go into cooking? Well, you can't do that much now in elementary school, but maybe they need to go to a magnet school that has a culinary program. And a lot of it is what your child's interests are and what they want to do. Leslie, did you want to add to that?
I guess my vision for Cameron was about being included in being part of the community. And because I really wanted him included in regular ed, I wanted him to go to the same school that his brother went to. I wanted him to ride the regular ed bus with support. I wanted him to be as much like a typical child as possible, because I think that opens up opportunities. Because he was included all through elementary school, when we got to middle school and you no longer sat with your class for lunch, he had friends, he had typical friends that made sure he had a place to sit at lunch. He wasn't sitting over at that table in the corner with all the special ed kids with the paraprofessionals, and he was invited to birthday parties, and he was just part of the community. And then that in turn leads to how he is today. Yes, he goes to a day program for people with disabilities, but it's not just babysitting. They're out in the community. They're volunteering at Katy Christian Ministries. They're going to the pizza place and folding pizza boxes. Some of the adults there do have jobs or part-time jobs. So yeah, just your vision. My vision was not, oh, I want my son to grow up and go live in Richmond State School. And I wanted to make that clear. And I think
Exactly.
it's really hard for somebody that's, my husband has a cousin who, for lack of a better term, is higher functioning than Cameron ever was. And because she was segregated her whole life, I think, what could her life be like if she had been included in the school community and everything? Her life, I think, would have looked a lot different than it does. She wouldn't have had to live in the state supported living center. So, in segregated placements, the expectations are generally lower. Same for behavior. So if your child, behavior could keep Cameron out of a good day program. The day programs aren't required to accept anybody. So make sure you have a good communication system for your child. Make sure they have a way to communicate, because a lot of times behaviors are communication. And make sure that you work just like you would with your typical child on bathroom issues and get that under control. Because if you want them, if they're not going to go to college or to work, you want them in a good day program, and you're not going to get in a good day program if you don't have good behavior, you don't have some way to communicate, and you can't take care of your bathroom needs. So that's just something to think about. Now, that being said, that wouldn't necessarily apply to somebody who had no way to do that. Like, I have a friend whose son is in a wheelchair and he's never going to be able to independently take care of his bathroom needs. So I'm not talking about somebody like that, but I'm talking like my son. If you saw him at first, you would think he was a typical person, until he made some weird noise or flapped his hands or something. But anyway, I'm rambling.
So you had asked, someone had asked about, can you make your vision statement part of the ARD? You can make whatever you want. I think it's really important to express the vision that you have for your loved one. And if you want to add that to the ARD document, absolutely. It's just, you want to make sure that the classes that you pick or that your child picks, especially when they get older, go toward that vision. My son was an office worker when he was a senior, because that was a way to get him to work on his social skills, be of service to the school, meet other people, and run errands. Then he worked in the cafeteria, and he had something there where he did the portion cuts and did the chips and things like that in the off hours when the other students weren't around. So yeah, that vision statement is something it's going to be fluid. It's always changing because your child's wants and desires might change. So I want to be respectful of everyone's time. It's about 7:17. We are so glad that you joined us tonight. So please fill out the survey. It's in the chat box, and I'll be sending the slides and the link again. And tomorrow night, we are, because we know you're not going to join us on Friday night at 6 o'clock. We have our last class tomorrow night, and we'll be reviewing some information. Keep those questions coming. These classes are for all of you. We want your loved one to lead a meaningful life, and meaningful means different things to different people, but we just don't want them graduating to the living room couch, having no friends, playing video games by themselves, or being glued to the TV. So thank you very much for joining us, interpreters, and Leslie and Christina, if you could stay on. Thank you all. Have a great, great rest of the night, and thank you.
Good night, all.
Bye.
Thank you. Wonderful meeting.